we had our meeting with Louise at the end of last year, and we hadn't sort of checked in for a little while, and we were getting itchy feet. We were thinking, what can we do? Because we're just sitting here. And we felt like we needed to do something. And so from that conversation, we asked a few questions of Louise, and she was very level-headed with her response, and I guess reminded us of this time, of this consolidation time, and being patient, and looking at what you have and working with it. And then in the meantime, we've had all these, houses have skyrocketed. We've had some properties in Brisbane that have been sitting there for a long time now without much growth. Now, all of a sudden, they're worth a lot more than what they were. We've had rents go up in that area. We've had one in particular go up $85 a week from one tenant to another. So from this year to last year, so we've had an increase of around $8,000 in rent.
That's nuts.
And so I think when we start now to see that all this waiting is now starting to pay off, now we don't feel like we want to do anything. We're riding that wave now, and it feels really nice.
You're listening to Property Investor Tales, stories from the front yard. Here's your host, Tabitha Bright.
Hello and welcome to Property Investor Tales, stories from the front yard, where I get to speak to property investors from around Australia about their investing journey. My name's Tabitha Bright, and I'm the head of coaching here at Positive Real Estate, where we help people build wealth through property. With over 8,000 clients across Australia and New Zealand, there are some incredible stories to tell, which hopefully make your investing journey that little bit easier and will inspire you along the way. So my guests today are Kristen and David, and we're going to talk about managing the highs and lows of investing, renegotiating interest rates successfully to make some massive savings, and how their property investing pays for their children's private school fees. So super exciting. Enjoy this conversation with Kristen and David.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Today we are traveling down to Adelaide. We have Kristen and David with us, part of our fabulous coaching and mentoring group. So David, Kristen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to meet you.
It's always awkward this first bit, so but we'll get chatting. We've had a good chat before this. Just a little bit around some of the stuff that you guys have done. And what's interesting, you've been part of the program for a long time, since around 2013, is that right? I've got that written down right. So, you've spent a fair bit of time with Positive, and you've acquired your portfolio. Some of it you did on your own beforehand, and some of it with Positive Real Estate. And the first part of your journey, when you started investing, when we were chatting, you had some comments that I see repeated again and again. And those were around finding like-minded people, not knowing what you don't know, buying close to, where you live, because that's a market you know. Tell me a little bit about that, because you started off investing. How did it go?
Yeah.
Oh, look, our first investment property was like a buy the land, build the house. It was in a subdivision 8 kilometres from the city. We were going on a night away, and we just happened to drive past and went in, looked at it, got emotionally attached, and thought, let's buy it. And literally, it was on a bit of a whim like that. We knew nothing about investing. We didn't have anyone in our family that we knew of that was investing. We didn't have any friends, close friends that we knew of that was investing. So I think we'd read a few books, actually. That's what had
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily just pure on a whim. We were reading and trying to educate ourselves, and
Robert
got
Kiyosaki,
Kiyosaki or
Yardney.
bit of Yardney
yes.
stuff and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And so we sort of got to the point where we were ready, or that
Mm.
we'd sort of got enough information to maybe get started. And so we sort of dipped our toe in and got moving on something. But then after that, that first initial one, we sort of were a bit stuck on where to go to next. And we got more and more educated, and we figured out that Adelaide is not probably the greatest place to put our money in, and that we wanted to go into some bigger cities and something where the growth would be better. But we didn't know how and what to do that, and that's sort of where we explored going, getting some support by a company, and that's where we ended up with Positive Real Estate. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're very pleased you did. Especially, I mean, you guys have been a part of the group for a long time. And I remember when we were just chatting before, you were saying that the buying bit's the fun bit, right? Because it's exciting. It's what we call the acquisitions phase. And so it's, you do your research, you go look at property. And if you like property, like, most of us do that are involved in a group like this, it's fun. You get to, you even get a bit of a sticky beak. I like to have a look at how people live, even state by state. It's so different. Interiors, all the works. And so the buying bit's fun. And then you've bought the thing. And then there's often as many questions as there are before you buy, right? It's like, your accounting, your property management, all of those things that we were talking about before. Tell me a little bit about that, because you guys felt like there were some big gaps or some questions for you that you didn't have people to bounce off. Is that right? I don't put words in your mouth.
Yeah, well, you're right. We love that acquisitions phase, and choosing our properties and seeing our portfolio grow, and then dreaming of what that's going to mean for us down the track, and all of that was really exciting. And then after that time, when we had no more money left and we'd spent it all, what do we do now? And to be honest, it's become a little tiny job for me. We have a few properties now, and so that requires me to pay the bills, to communicate with the property managers, to be on top of the market, and just be aware of all the finances, and move money around so that it pays for all the different parts that we have.
Yeah.
It's not a incredibly onerous task, but I'd spend a bit of time each week definitely on that, the sort of the day-to-day runnings of it. It's sort of in a little business of its own in some times, and then
100%. Yeah.
And then when you when it becomes new time for when the leases end, or that becomes a bit busier then, because we now need to look at what we're going to do with the rent.
And maintenance, if there's anything that needs doing in the property, and do we need to do it now? Can we wait? Is that going to give us more rent? Is it not? Is it cosmetic? So lots of decisions like that to make. And just even, I think I was alluding to before in our discussions before the podcast, is just really keeping on top of the property managers and making sure that you have a really good relationship with them. And, there was one property that was being advertised for us, and look, I've got a bit of a background in photography as well. And, I wasn't really enjoying the photos that they were using to advertise our property. I didn't feel like that was really a great selling point. Some of the photos weren't even of our property. And so, I think holding them accountable and making sure that they are doing all the things that they need to be doing and what you're paying them to do that they are doing, that they're making sure they contact the tenants, 3 months in advance, not leaving it to, the last 3 weeks that they're there. We have overseas students staying in one that they headed back to their home country, and then our property manager couldn't contact them. We've had lots of issues like that. So, and that has really made us be a lot more proactive. And keeping tabs on the property managers and making sure that they're keeping to the timelines and that they're communicating with us, that when we ring them, they ring us back within a certain amount of time, and not ignoring us. Property managers.
It's the old squeaky wheel, isn't it? And
I think it is a little.
And sort of further to that, I've sort of in myself, I've been trying best to really be thankful and praise property managers when they 100%. Just pay the bill or pass on the water bill to the tenants or something like that. That we do that, but in the same breath, we've also changed to property managers because we weren't happy with the way that they communicated with us, and
really
that's
important.
A big point. So getting a bit more experienced in that area, we then we said we're looking for a new property manager, and these are the expectations that we have for you. If we call you or we email you, we expect communication within 24 hours. Are you going to be okay with that? Is that something that you can meet? And if
great.
you can't, then that's fine. We'll find somebody else that will. And having a few different properties.
I mean, that's a great point. So really you're qualifying your property manager. You're hiring them like you would hire a staff member. And I guess one of the key things that I like that you guys are highlighting and you've discovered along your journey is that it is like running a business. I'm still stuck back on, you were advertising a property that had photos that weren't even your photos. Someone rocking rocking up would see a totally different property.
It was a part of an apartment complex.
It was the right kitchen. Like, it wasn't our kitchen at all. Ours was an open plan kitchen. They had a wall there. Ours had a view out to the city that wasn't included in the initial photos. And I'm thinking, isn't that a major selling point for the property? We need to make sure we have, that as the main thumbnail picture. And it's little things like that can mean someone comes to your property to view it or makes an inquiry about it. And they all matter. They all really matter.
And so really it's running another business, and it's like having a part-time business on top of everything else. And I think this is why, only the 1% or under of Australia get to retire themselves in any kind of meaningful way when it comes to income, because you do have to do more than what the average person is doing in order to create this for yourselves. But I've heard that you're putting in some systems in place. So you're managing that load, I'll call it. It's not onerous, like you said, but it requires a commitment. You're doing it weekly, so it doesn't bank up, it doesn't build up. You're putting some of your own systems in place to manage your part-time business, which is going to provide you the choices later on. Would that be correct? Correct summary?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Fantastic. And so this brings me to the second point that I want to pick out of what you've said for people is there's a difference between acquisition phase and consolidation phase. So acquisition phase to the uninitiated is you're going out, you're buying, you're doing your research, you're looking at stuff, you're having fun, generally speaking. Might be a bit stressful, particularly if you're buying at auction. And that's kind of the exciting thing, because you feel like you're doing something proactive to get stuff moving. It's new, it's buzzy. Then comes consolidation phase. So you're tapped out of your borrowing. You're now dealing with the problems, the normal problems, not abnormal, normal problems of managing any small business / property portfolio. You're waiting. You're waiting for the market. You hope that it's going to do something within X amount of time. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it takes longer. And amongst all of that, there's all of the rigmarole to deal with, the boring stuff. And this is what we call consolidation phase, when you can no longer go out and buy, or you may have finished your purchasing strategy. So now it's paying down debt, saving, getting rid of, using your tax refunds for paying down debt on the family home, or other options that we'll talk about in a second. And so it feels sometimes like you're just spinning the wheels. And this is where we see, if clients are going to have a challenge with their portfolio, it's usually not during the purchasing side of things. It's just about always in consolidation phase. And I'd say there's a good 5 to 7 years of consolidation phase where people just get so fed up and they almost want to undo themselves by selling something just for the sake of it being interesting. And then you go, I'm just going to sell this damn thing. I'm going to trade it with something else better. It is a viable strategy, but you really have to do your numbers and decide whether it is in your best interest. Because 9 times out of 10, just holding, even if your property's a 7 out of 10, not a 9 out of 10, holding it, you don't have the in-out costs and stuff. Have you guys felt frustrated during the consolidation phase? I can see a couple of nods there.
I think we did. We had a lot of changes happen. We've done a lot. We've probably been in this consolidation phase. This is probably our 7th year, I would say.
Congratulations.
So we definitely, and in that time, we've done lots of different things. We've packed up and we've moved overseas. We've sold everything that we owned and we went to live in America with our children. David did some different work. I was a lady of leisure. We've then come back, and that was an effort in itself to try to keep our properties afloat, maintain everything during that time. We've come back. David was in a very comfortable job, earning a very good salary, and then has made the decision to quit that and to start a business, which, as you know, with banks, don't like that too much. So he's gone from a very secure job in education, which they were throwing money at us, to now we don't want to touch you with a 10-foot pole. So that's been in the last couple of years, like we've wanted to maybe do some things, had an idea, maybe we'll build this, maybe we'll renovate this, maybe we'll whatever, but servicing's been a real problem for us in the last couple of years. But, and I think we had our meeting with Louise at the end of last year and we hadn't sort of checked in for a little while, and we were getting itchy feet. We were thinking, what can we do? Because we're just sitting here. And we felt like we needed to do something. And so from that conversation, we asked a few questions of Louise, and she was very level-headed with her response, and I guess reminded us of this time, of this consolidation time, and being patient and looking at what you have and working with it. And then in the meantime, we've had all these, houses have skyrocketed. We've had some properties in Brisbane that have been sitting there for a long time now without much growth. Now, all of a sudden, they're worth a lot more than what they were. We've had rents go up in that area. We've had one in particular go up $85 a week. From one tenant to another. So from this year to last year, so we've had an increase of around $8,000 in rent.
That's nuts.
And so I think when we start now to see that all this waiting is now starting to pay off. Now we don't feel like we want to do anything. We're riding that wave now, and it feels really nice. But we did have to have a lot of patience, and David does do a lot of the day-to-day conversing with our property managers, all the emails that come along with it, the paying of the bills. And so it's kind of nice for David in particular, for all of that work that he's put in over the last 7 years of maintaining the these properties, is that now we're actually starting to get the benefits from that.
Well, that's awesome. And because essentially you guys have been juggling a number of things, like a lot of change is what I've heard outside of your investing. And not only that, so you've had all that change, then you've also got family, you're juggling careers, you're juggling a new business. So, you know, there's a stack of stuff, and people will say, well, like, how do you do it all? Because often for people with young families, because you started the major part of your acquisitions portfolio when your youngest was a baby.
Yeah. We had.
So how did you guys manage
3
that,
under
like,
5
emotionally?
Yeah, I know. We had 3 under 5, and I wasn't working.
3 under 5.
I was doing some relief teaching or something like that.
You weren't in paid employment.
Yeah, when we started this whole thing. So
yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah, but we've had a few things help us along the way. We lived in a boarding house for 3 years, which meant that we weren't paying any rent or anything like that. So during that time, that really helped us to save up some money and
great.
be able to pay for maintenance that might have come up at a property. We just could easily pay that. But yeah, we've certainly had some times as well where we have felt under the pump, and we have had to approach our accountant for any way that we could save or gain money in some way, so that we didn't have to borrow any money from parents or anything like that. So we've had some highs, and we've had some real lows too. We've just managed to weather it, and I think the whole time we've known that what we don't want to do is sell.
So you've done whatever
we want
taken.
to hold on, and we've tried to hold on.
Well, if I think about our journey, probably one of the big aspects for us has been the tax benefits that we've received. It's been significant, and even though, you know, like we talked about, our investments in Brisbane have really only grown in the last year, and up until then they very marginally improved in growth and capital gains. But you know, there was a stage at one point where I was paying zero tax. So there's, you know, 30 or 40 grand a year, whatever that you're better off just by investing. So you know, initially we knew that whilst we might not be getting any benefits out of the property per se, that the tax benefits were really significant for us. And so in partnership with that, we found a really good accountant that we trust, and that's got a lot of time for us, which is wonderful. And
that's awesome.
So so we really have been able to maximise our tax benefits through him. We've also started SMSF and went all through that path as well. And so he now runs that for us, and we've got property in our SMSF too. And
that's fabulous.
And so all of that has, you know, it's been good. I think with the SMSF, one issue that we found was that when I had my stable job in education, that I would get my super put straight into our super account, and then with all the changes that I've done with my employment, that's no longer happening. And so there was a bit of a shortfall there that we've had to since sort of pay, and potentially didn't buy the best property. But knowing that the SMSF is a really long-term investment, that we can't do anything, you know, we're just sort of hanging on and just sort of, there's not a lot we can really do there, but it's manageable, but it is still that, we're paying for that. We're behind a little bit with that, but
because of the change where you have to put in your own super, and because you're self-employed with your business.
And I work for the government, and so they don't allow us to take our super out. And so we have to keep it where it is. So my super.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I can't help out in that way.
Yeah.
So we have a bit of a shortfall now. Which,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I understand. It's these changes to our position that can have a short-term impact on our strategy. And, long-term, the goal is obviously to get that property paid off inside your super for your cash flows, and because there's benefits to that. Now, I'm not licensed to talk super, so I will make that clear. But it's good, good to hear what you're doing, what's worked, what hasn't. So basically what I'm hearing from you guys is that you've been very specific about putting together your 6-star team, your accountants, your property managers, your finance people, because let's talk about your finance. Oh, actually, I want to just go back and address one comment you made. You talked about how the properties in Brisbane hadn't seen any growth for a period of time. Normal or abnormal problem?
Oh, look, when we first bought it, we did so with the sort of advice that it was the next growth area, and in my head, we always knew that the price between Sydney and Brisbane, the wider that gap was, at some point it's going to shorten and they're going to go up. So that's always been in the back of our mind. But initially, we would have loved to have probably gone into Sydney and then had that growth straight away, and then
crystal balls are nice, right?
But we also couldn't afford as much over there either. So
no, and the rents, you're so negative there. That's part of the challenge. And I think what I'm aiming to highlight here is that often, even despite all of the data, all of the commentators, all of the the big houses that do all the economic predicting, your SQM researchers, your RP datas, all of those guys, the market can do its own thing, and it can be a contrary beast. And so, I know a lot of clients would feel very similar, where they'd sat in the Brisbane market kind of twiddling their thumbs going, when is this going to do something? I was sure it was going to do something. But when it does go off, it tends to do exactly what you guys have experienced, where it goes absolutely nuts and everything seems to go at the same time. Rents, capital growth. Then you may find it has a correction. It may flatten off, and then it's going to probably sit flat for a number of years. And just understanding that those cycles, they're normal, they're part of. Other times you jag it, because what's happening with Adelaide at the moment is it's also seeing some heat. Yeah,
it's going well here. So we've got our own property, and then that first investment that we had is here too. So that's been good for us too. But we really like that the clock and the cycle from Positive Real Estate and where they're positioned, and that's part of the appeal of Positive Real Estate. We love that it was about educating us and not about selling something to us. And we had Adrian Rivish was our first. Was our first coach. And I really clearly remember a conversation with him when we were in that acquisitions phase, and I was saying, Adrian, what do you think about this property? And he says, well, okay. And he just asked me questions, and he'd say, well, is it the right type of property? Is it in the right location? Is it? Well, tell me the data. Tell me this. And then it ended up being, so what do you think? Is it a good property? For you to buy? And so it was never about telling me, go and get that property or this thing. It's about educating us so that
getting you to think about it.
We could do it now. And so in a similar way, the next time we're not acquiring anything, but if we did go through that, I feel like we'd be better skilled to be able to do that, even though it was a long time ago. We probably need to pick up on some. Yeah.
Because then if we come back to the 6-star team, you guys have been, and I think what is highlighted with you guys is that you're very proactive. So you're on top of your paperwork. You're on top of what's happening with your rents, managing your property managers, all of that stuff. You meet with your accountant regularly. The other part of it is your finance. And so you guys have been very proactive in that space recently. Tell me a little bit about that, because you've made some big savings just going back to lenders and sorting that out. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah,
well, that was a conversation again that when we were talking with Louise at the end of last year, just as a check-in, we were getting frustrated. We were sitting there for a while. We were thinking, should we sell our house, go rent somewhere? You know, we just had so many questions and everything. And then she just happened to mention, because we were talking about our serviceability, hence David's job's not great for the banks right now.
Yeah.
So we were like, we can't refinance, we can't this or that. And then she's like, you can just renegotiate your rates. You just call up the banks and you can do that yourselves. And so David started and do you want to take over from there?
Yeah, well, if we just back it up a little step, there's so much focus on the rent, and we were so aware of rent, and I really want to get $15 increase in rent and not $10, and no, let's push it to $20. And so you've got in your head that rent is the way for you to make money in your properties, and the ignoring the fact that by lowering your loans, you're doing exactly the same aspect, but it's something that's not as in your face. So that's probably one of the big learning things that we've got in the last year, and I wish we had managed this earlier. So if I could give anyone some advice, would be to look at their loans and renegotiate them with the bank. So for us, like we said, we couldn't refinance, but we would, Louise said to us, you ring up, say, the Commonwealth Bank and say, what's the payout figure for our loan? And that sort of shoots you into a bit of a, they're
going to leave us. They're going to leave us.
Yes.
Yes, the retention team.
So you might go to the retention team and you might not, but then you would then also figure out what's the best price that you could get at certain, interest only bank, or fixed and so you'd have that there and say, we're going to move to, X bank and it's going to be at this rate. What can you do? And then we would negotiate that and I'd fix the variable. And so in the same way that we might be, really trying to get $10 or $20 extra in rent, we were getting, $200, $300, $400 a month that we could get less.
So we've saved. So this year we're going to save around 15,000 in interest payments.
That is
across our portfolio.
15,000.
And then with the with the rents going up in particular areas, in Brisbane, we've got another one in New South Wales that's also gone up. But a lot of them have had an increase in rent, which meant that we've got an extra 8,000 roughly this year as well. So and I was saying before with you that that kind of money, we're paying, like that combined is our school fees for our kids to go to the private school. That's just paid for their education.
That's amazing.
So it's nice.
I just want to reiterate that. I just want to reiterate that for everyone. So, the 15 and the 8, that's about 23 grand. And you guys are both in education. David, you've got your own business now, teaching leadership skills to big companies, and helping with culture in companies. You come from an education background. Kristen, you're a teacher. You're you're a very brave woman and teach high school. Like, you definitely see the whites in my eyes on that one. Yeah, my own teenager scarred me for life. I hope she doesn't watch this. She'll be so angry at me. And I only had the one. I don't know how you guys do three. And so education is really important to you. Hence, we see this theme, this commonality around an education program like Positive Real Estates. And it's important to you, I imagine, to have the kids in private schools. So you guys in a single sweep have been able to sort out your school fees for the year, the 23K, simply by negotiating with the banks and getting your rents up. That's good business management.
Look, I think it's good and bad. It's if we look at the loan,
that was my big wrap up.
I'm getting to a point here. It's going to be really good.
Okay. I'll trust in you.
Yeah. Look, the loan improvements has been significant, and that's because we've neglected to pay really good attention to that over the past 3, 4, 5 years. So there's a lesson learned. I don't expect other people will potentially get as big a savings in their loans if they neglect it for maybe 5 years and just get whatever loan they can get, and then sit on it without paying attention like we did. Then 5 years down the track, or 3, 4, or 5, you might end up, having the reductions that we've had. But that's probably, it's a lesson that we've definitely learned. It's great to be on that better side now. It would have been better if we had been aware of that and done that from the start. Yeah.
It's interesting. We make assumptions, and the assumption is that most people will be on top of it. I can tell you right now, 99% of people will not be on top of it. Probably myself included, which I should not have on a recording. But honestly, like the amount of people I see when I sit down and I relook at their portfolio and we talk through what do they need to do to make those little changes, 99% is probably a bit rough, but 90% of people will not be on top of loans and rents as two big factors. The other's the tax variation.
Yeah, it's the non-sexy part of the business, isn't it, of the property management. It's that keeping on top of your property manager, addressing issues. It's not easy to do. There may be some conflict in that, and it's hard to have those conversations. And then similarly, you're sort of addressing that in some ways with the banks, and you're going into some murky waters and not quite sure where you're going to go, and trying to play a bit of game of poker with them in some ways. But
poker.
It's think about what you would do for a $5,000 job increase. What wage rise, which you'll get taxed on as well. Or here is what can you do for $3,000 different? That's only, what is it, a couple $100 in a month, and you can probably get that in a lot of changes in your loans. So that would be the big message that I would like to pass on to the listeners, would be to check your loans. Maybe if you need a hand in how to address it, maybe talk to your coach. That's what worked for us. She sort of, Louise Carr was great at sort of giving us a little script and saying, this is what you're going to ask, this is how you're going to go about it. And then I had a look at all of our loans, and some of them we couldn't do. We just finished, but the others that we did, we got onto it straight away.
Oh, fantastic, guys. Good job. And then to wrap up, my final question, the classic podcast question. So if you could travel back in time and give young Kristen and young David some advice, what would it be?
You go.
Well, it's probably the same. Just invest earlier, like a lot of people would say. I remember when we started, I was only 30, I think, when we started. And, you know, that's not old to start investing in property at all. But David was 34 at the time. And even at 30 and 34, we were thinking, we're late, you know. Imagine if we'd done this earlier.
Yeah, 10 years earlier. Yeah.
But, you know, we're optimistic that our portfolio will get us to a point that we will be able to retire earlier than normal.
That's awesome.
And that we will have an income, a passive income that we can live comfortably off, which is our goal.
Yep.
And, you know, holidays and things like that. We're the type of people that don't want to fully retire and have nothing to do. We do like to be of service and keep busy. So, you know, we'd be happy just working 1 or 2 days a week or something like that later in the future. But investing earlier. And we sometimes sit there when we're having a glass of wine or beer and when we're looking up realestate.com, checking out, you know, what the rents are going for now in this suburb and that suburb, and thinking, and then looking at how much we bought the property for back all those times ago, and we just think, I'm so glad we did that. Aren't you so glad we did that? And we have no regrets at all buying our properties. We just wish we'd done it a lot earlier.
Yeah, I think it's the common theme in everyone I interview. How about you, David? Anything to add to that?
Oh, no, look, that's the sentiments from both of us. But yeah, I think the message about checking your loans is something that I've learned, and not necessarily trusting your property manager to do what's right for you all the time. I think you do need to be on top of them and push them. We've changed twice because we weren't happy with the service that we've had, and that we just felt that we could get someone to be more attentive to us. And so they're probably the tips. And I think the long term, when we consider the houses that we bought about 10 years ago now, and what we paid for them and what you could now, it just shows to you that you have to hold them, because you can't buy a property like that for that price anymore. So the long-term hold is probably the thing that we're looking at as well.
Well, congratulations, guys. You've done amazingly. And I mean, you know, hats off to you and your, I'll call them the business systems, because they're working for you. And, you know, if everyone was as clear-minded as you about setting up some good processes and systems and following it and talking to the people you need to talk to, I mean, the results you're getting are because of that and your tenacity. So make sure you do get a hobby. Don't if the new business isn't causing you enough you know, time and effort, and just leave your properties be. And I think you've learnt that lesson nicely. So good job, guys, and thank you so much for today's time. It was awesome to have you.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, you take care. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to Property Investor Tales. Remember to subscribe so you get notified every time a new episode drops. As you can guess, I love hearing people's property investor tales. So if you'd like to share yours, then please get in touch with me via email at propertyinvestortales@positivementor.com.au. We would also love your feedback, and I would appreciate a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Remember, you can watch all of these podcasts over on YouTube at Positive Mentor or at positivementor.com.au. Until then, take care, happy investing, and bye for now.